How you doing, Mr. Mosier? How was the wedding? Awesome, congratulations. All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order at 5:49 p.m. and welcome you to the S&A meeting for October 23rd, 2013. I'd first like to start off with roll call and attendance. John Bowen. Here. Joseph Bryant. Here. J.D. Shrest. Here. Sarah Feeney. Here. Miles Glover.
Here.
Sharon Jonasson.
Here.
Kay Kennison.
Here.
Robert Lane.
Here.
Robert Mosier.
Here.
Avery Fillet. Actually, I have to remove that name this week. Todd Stiver.
Here.
Ashley Stubbs.
Here.
Derek Whittam.
Here.
Connie Williams.
Here.
And myself, Jacob Whitman. I am present. Thank you for coming this week. We'll move on to subsection 3, agenda approval.
I would like to recommend an adjustment to the agenda to move Andy Fields under new business up to either right below the public comment or right after we vote on the supplemental funding request, because the review from the subcommittee might take substantial amount of time and discussion.
Okay. Second. Okay. Ashley seconds. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Motion passes. So we'll be moving new business. Andrew Fields request for exception to fund sweeping rule. We'll move him right under subsection 6, public comment. At this time, I'd like to move to subsection 4, approval of the minutes from October 16th, 2013. Oh. Okay. Joey?
I move to approve the minutes.
Okay, is there a second? Second, Miles. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? One abstention. Motion passes. At this time, I'd like to move to reports, subsection 5, and I'll start off as the chair. I have nothing to report. Oh, we're gonna have to remove one, Avery Fillet. He would love to do S&A, but he actually has to go to Club Senate due to his position at work in DOD. He works under clubs and organizations, so he's a voting member of Club Senate and has to go. So, and that's only every other week, but we can't have him here every other week, so we're gonna have to remove that name. So we're looking for 2 spots, so if you know people who would like to apply, send them to the BOD website, and the committee applications are there. So that's my report, and we'll move to the advisors.
Only 2 pieces I have is we did, and Sharon did share this last week, but we did get the official memorandum from the Business and Finance Committee saying that they did approve our recommendation to the adjustment to base funding. And since it does exceed the $25,000 approval authority, it is being sent on to the Board of Directors to be voted on at the December 6th meeting.
Board of Trustees. Yeah.
Board of Trustees. Thank you. And this is regarding the S&A supplemental fund increase with $29,390.35. And then the only other report just that I have is just the comment to congratulate Robert. We didn't know that he was going to be here or not this week, but he did get married last week, and we'll have something a little more official for him next week since we know that he will be here. But just congratulations to Robert on getting married.
All right, congratulations, Robert.
Oh, I did have one other. For those of you just to be aware, and Sharon's going to pull up here, is we do have the pictures uploaded on the S&A website now. So they are all on there for our official.
We look good, guys.
On there. So
We look good.
I want to say thank you to Kate for getting those up there so quickly for us all.
Yeah, thank you, Kay. All right, anything else?
No, that's all.
Sharon?
Could I ask for a clarification on what they actually were moving that about my copy yet?
Yeah.
We had one, that we put forward to, oh,
We
never
did.
mind.
Do you want me some
No,
clarification?
I'm good. I just realized that the other was just a recommendation on the 275,000 budget.
Okay. This is, okay.
And that wouldn't be, sorry. My bad.
All right, any other reports from the advisors?
No, but before Andy Fields goes, I would like to get a precursor of a reminder of this is what our policies say so that people understand why it's here.
All right, sounds good. All right, we'll move on to public comment. Section 6, any public comment at this time? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to Andy Fields' request for exception to fund sweeping rule. And at this time, I'd like to let Sharon speak to fill in the board on why Andy is here. So pass it over to Sharon.
So about 2 years ago, it was, I believe when Paul Stavac was the advisor of the sheriff, that helps you figure out how long ago it was. There was discussion and an approval to make an adjustment to our policies and procedures regarding vacancies for positions that S&A funds. And so what that policy change said, if a position is vacant for more than 6 months, then those funds are subject to pull back to the committee to go into the operating budget. There is an exception point in our policy that says before funds are pulled back, the person or the program that has the funds that are subject to pull back can come to the committee and ask for an exception so that the funds are not pulled back. So it gives them a chance to come in and explain how did they use them or why they didn't and so on. So that policy does say they need to do that in advance. However, because the committee was not meeting during the summer period, there wasn't any way for him to come to the committee. He had asked to be put on our agenda as soon as we started hearing things. I did notify him as soon as they hit this 6-month point so that he was aware that those funds could potentially come against his budget. And so we have had some discussion on it, and I'm not going to go into all the whys because that's probably part of his presentation. So I just kind of wanted to make sure people understood because this is the first time we have had somebody come in and ask for an exception, and this is a fairly new one.
Okay.
So I have that one slide. I have 20 slides. No, so I know you guys are expecting a bit shorter. So this is the basic timeline of what happened, and just to kind of give a little bit of background. I started in late January. The interim associate director position reverted back February 1st. Immediately getting my feet wet, kind of reorganizing, looked at a rewrite, which actually took quite a bit of time through June until we were finally able to get it posted, just as far as getting all the stakeholders involved and being okay with the rewrites. We did a search that happened through the summer. It was extended. It was an extended search. We tried to shorten it up, but our candidate pool was very limited, and so we tried to get more candidates and get a diverse set of candidates. And, we had marginal success with that. We did interviews in late August, so July was our 6-month window that we missed, which is why I wasn't able to come to you. I thought we were going to get it by July originally. It's gone. But anyways.
There it is. It's back. Sorry.
Yeah, it's back.
I was trying to shrink it so you can see all the ones.
Yeah, and we pushed it over. We pushed it back to get a greater diverse set of candidates. We did the interview process, and then the search failed because the candidates didn't meet the criteria that we were looking for. So that's kind of where we are today. We ended up doing, so I'll just kind of explain the bottom here. There's actually one more, I think. Yeah. But we have an interim that's starting November 1st that is able to secure, that took some haggling to get her to come on board. And then we're actually going to align our search, we're going to research the position in the spring, coincide with the national conference for the Recreation Association. So it's, we've always missed that, and that's where the greatest set of candidates are. So We missed the 6-month mark, so we went 9 months. And what I did with the salary savings, I actually used it to fund another position that I've since gotten funding for. So that's how I use the salary savings in that sense. So I'm asking for an exception for this. It was not our intent to go as long as it did. And I wanted to come get in front of you as soon as I possibly could.
May I ask, why is it so difficult to fill this position? What criteria wasn't met?
So
I feel like that's a good position.
right, it's a great position. The candidate pool is limited depending on the search. A lot of people working in university recreation are always looking for new positions in the spring. Look at the spring to make a move in the summer. Because we got pushed back so far from the rewrites to the process, trying to get all the stakeholders involved, Dean was heavily involved, HR was heavily involved, so it took a lot longer than anticipated. We missed the window. Yeah, I tried really hard. That's how I think it was.
Does the board have any questions for Andy at this time?
I have a question. Can you just clarify something you said a few minutes ago? You took the salary savings and you got, from not having this position filled, you directed it towards a different position? Is that right?
Right, well, then since I've gotten funding for it.
So there's no problem then if you're ultimately able to fill this position, you don't need another source of money to pay for it?
Yeah, this is all set. Thank you.
So the question now is whether or not we're going to be clawing back the money that you couldn't spend on the thing that you should have spent it on instead of spending on something else.
Yes.
Okay.
What is the amount of that money?
It's roughly $61,524.
That includes benefits.
So it's salary plus benefits. That's the total amount.
And so 20% of that is the benefits, right?
What, 30? Yeah, 30.
How long do you feel it will take to fill that position once you start the interviewing process again?
So we anticipate since we're going to be moving along with the national kind of cycle, is that we'll find a good candidate in spring and we'll start in the summer. So our intern will go through June 15th and we're looking for the next position to start at June 16th.
Any other questions? Ashley?
My understanding is that the fiscal year starts in July. Thank you. So why waive this now rather than just request the funding again in the coming year? Does that make sense?
So,
Yeah, sure.
let me explain how the funding works, and that might answer your question, or you might still have a question to Dr. Field. So, the position, the associate director, is part of the flat funding that S&A funds to the rec center. So they get that funding each year. But because the position was vacant for a certain amount of time, those funds became subject to pullback. So either he needs to figure out another way to fund this, the way he used the salary savings, or we say, no, you did a good use of the funds, or however you guys want to say it, or so those are the two options. It is already funded. The associate director is already funded for this year. It's just for the period that it was blank that it becomes a question. Answer your question.
Okay.
Yeah.
My question is, if the money's allocated through S&A and base funding, because it was allocated in quadrennium, which is already passed, I get it.
So it spanned
Because
2
he
years.
doesn't necessarily, it spans 2 years.
It spans over the fiscal year end. So there were a couple months prior, and it went all the way into November 1st is when the interim starts. So it's a 6-month period that doesn't fall within our fiscal calendar year. So basically, it would be pulling back funds from that program to cover 3 months prior year and what we funded for this upcoming year, so that the position is only funded from November 1 forward.
So if we were to pull back funds, you wouldn't have funding for that position, correct?
If we were to pull back funds, he would have funding for the interim position, but his budget would be impacted by $60-some thousand.
And that's why.
And that is why, although he's already found funding for the position that he temporarily funded with this money while he was growing the business and establishing the funding, he would need to now go back and figure out, okay, how do I build this whole?
I think so. I don't think you answered my question, but I don't think I'm articulating it well. So it's okay.
It's my understanding, we have the funding moving forward for this position. It's flat funded. It's just this interim, that's a period where it was vacant. You guys can decide what you'd like to do. And if you decide to take it back, then I have to figure out how am I going to backfill it from somewhere else. Yeah.
I got that. I understand that. Yeah.
Derek and then JD.
So just to clarify, we are demanding that you give back money you no longer have, and you want us to not demand that.
I think you have the right to take it back.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm asking for an exception.
Okay.
JD and then Joe.
What was the position that you added that you used that funding for?
We use it for the head athletic training position.
What do they do?
They provide athletic training for all students. Anybody that has kind of a sports injury, they go into the rec center, to the back, into the athletic training office. They can be seen. So they basically get some, they deal with rolled ankles, elbows, anything that a student has, any kind of issue. Give them some free treatment.
Joey.
I'd like to defer to Richard Shields.
So I just want to remind the S&A process, when we approve the base funding amounts, they give a proposal and they share what the specific monies are going to be used for, and they have some latitude within their budget to readjust those things. So again, that specifically happens. This specific issue really is about the pullback. So that money, because it wasn't originally spent, would have just stayed in the pot. And the policy after that 6-month window would be that it would be pulled back to you, that can be used for later into your operating budget of S&A for you to allocate again. So what basically has happened is that they, at that 6-month window, because of the summer and all those other pieces, when it would have potentially come in, they went ahead and allocated it to another role within their office to fund. So again, the question really isn't so much about what they funded or not funded. It was, is it the pullback of that money? Because at S&A, we don't get into the business of telling them how to operate that. It really is about the pullback. So I encourage you to think about that as the policy.
Okay. Does the board have any further questions for Andy Fields? Did you guys want to table this for next week or discuss now?
There has to be a motion there.
Yeah.
To table or to.
Okay. That's right.
I'd like to make a motion to discuss and vote tonight.
Point of clarification.
Yeah.
You don't have to make a motion to do that. You can just make a motion. You can continue discussing it. If there's a motion to approve it, you can just make that at that point. But if we want to wait and save it for next week, you can make a motion to table it to next week.
Okay. So I think we should, call the question, I believe is the one, right, where we can vote right away. Is that right? Is there any
You'll need to make a motion.
I think motion to vote.
motion to vote? I'd like to make a motion to vote. Is that correct?
Are you moving to approve or?
I'm moving to approve that we approve this exception to the sweeping vote rule.
That's what you do.
Okay.
Okay. Is there a second? Derek, second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? One opposition? Any abstentions? One abstention? All right, motion passes. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you very much.
All right, at this time, I'd like to move on to Section 7, Supplemental Funding Requests Voting. Last week, we had number 1403, AS CWU Board of Directors Student Life and Facilities, request $1,540.56. And at this time, I'd also like to remind you guys, I can currently continue to sit as chair through this discussion, but I'm not going to engage. There is a conflict of interest as I do work in the Board of Directors office, so just remember that. But I'd like to open up the table for discussion. Derek.
I have a unrelated question. Exempting ourselves from the room, what's the procedure for that?
Like, you want to excuse yourself from there?
Yes. Is there a procedure?
You can just say
I'm
I
excluding
have
myself.
a conflict. And you can
Oh,
stay
there's
at the
somebody.
table and be.
Oh, you need to support.
Oh, you need to.
Personal privilege.
Yeah.
Answer, yeah.
Okay.
Question of personal privilege.
Okay. Yeah, just,
Yeah, you can say that.
okay, sounds good. Great.
Don't vote on them.
In some bodies they do. Yes.
Really? Huh, interesting.
If you was quorum, then it's up to the chair.
I have
Sharon?
a comment. So when we listened to the presentation last week, I was very concerned with the request from the standpoint that only purchasing one suit still does not provide adequate cleaning times and turnarounds and the health issues when I think of bloodborne pathogens and airborne pathogens and a lot of stuff. I mean, I just hold my hand over my mouth and I breathe into it, you get all that moisture and that's all being captured in that suit. So I'm really concerned that it's only to buy one suit. I feel that two suits would be more adequate. And then I also am concerned that the budget wasn't funded adequately and there was no request for cleaning in a more frequent manner to also help to maintain the suits and to ensure that we're addressing all health hazards.
Fun?
What was the cost of it? That was one thing for an option. What was the cost of it?
$7,500.
$7,580.
$540.56.
And if I recall, we got something elsewhere, which is what they were asking for last year.
They only asked me for.
And they never did isolate the cleaning cost. But they said it was cleaned every 3 days, I believe.
Just point of clarification.
Joey and then JD.
Is that cost of $7,540 is for the new suit as well as an additional cooling vest and 2 additional reservoir straws?
Yes.
So the complete solution cooling vest and program, I believe the cost, if I'm looking at this correctly, the complete solution with the cooling vest for one whole new suit would be $6,337. If I'm reading this correctly.
That's without shipping and tax as well.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, but
Connie?
Is
Or-
that-
Hold on, JD, do you have something to say?
I believe they actually do have the cleaning cost for $540 in the presentation. There's a later slide that broke it down. Right, hold on. Right there on the very bottom, 540 total, $60 dry cleaning.
This was his budget.
That's what his budget for one suit was. Is that correct? So I'm
Yes.
assuming if they were purchasing an additional 2 suits, they would need the additional $1,080. Is
To
that
stay consistent with the one
To stay
$60 dry
consistent.
cleaning. Connie, did you have something to say? And then Derek and Sharon.
I wanted, that's a good point. I want a little clarification. So the annual base amount that they presented covers one suit. Is that correct?
For cleaning once a month.
For cleaning once a month. Okay. They've asked for additional to purchase another suit, only one more. We're debating whether that's enough to clean frequently enough to prevent any health issues. So I'm still a little unclear on what they need, if they have the correct number of suits.
So they asked for 2 suits instead of think it might help.
Did you have something to say, Derek?
Yeah, so, and I'm a little bit confused. They're not getting an additional 2 suits, so they get additional 1 for a total of 2, right?
Well,
Yes.
That's, I mean, that was what was presented.
Sharon?
So they asked to purchase one additional suit. The other suit is close to end of life. But what they're doing in between wearings is just air drying it, which doesn't take care of. So what the concern was, if they only buy one additional suit, and as often as the suit is used, I know I personally wouldn't want to get in one after somebody wore it all day. It is one suit, one new suit, efficient, and is it sufficient enough to avoid health hazards and to be able to use the Wellington suit as much as it's now being promised, because it's being funded by a lot of different agencies that also threw in money.
Derek, Rob, and Sarah.
So, okay, so we're talking about, because they did only ask for 1 new one, for a total of 2. And we're talking about maybe giving them a second one for a total of 3 temporarily until the old one dies, as it were.
That is what I was saying, that
Okay.
I personally think.
I think we should ask them not to air dry it. Couldn't it be a liability to the university if someone were to get ringworm or something like that from wearing the suit? I mean, it seems a little concerning to me.
Sarah, Sarah then Joey.
I was just sort of wondering what our options are. I mean, we could move to fund it as requested. Is it possible for us to move that they come back with another request that adds a suit? Can we fund for more than they've asked for?
We can fund for more than they ask.
Oh,
We can fund for more, but we can't determine
how they use it. Okay.
Well,
Okay.
not necessarily.
Okay.
Joey and then Derek.
Well, if you want to.
Do you want to add to that, Sharon?
Clarify that, not
Yeah, you want to clarify that,
So-
Sarah?
So when we talk about that, that's discussing, when we allocate money to a program budget, or if a group is going, if a group is going to a conference, we don't say, you can only spend this much on hotels and only this much on air travel. We do have the option of, we can fund, we can say we're gonna provide an additional, if I take out 7,000, we're gonna fund an additional 7,250, but it has to be spent on, it is for the purpose of purchasing a second Wellington suit in addition to the one that they're already asking for. We may want to consider, if we think about cleaning, that they actually add when they do their annual report, they actually call out what they spent on cleaning, so that it's really apparent that if we did add money for cleaning, that we can see that they spent the funds how we intended.
Okay. Derek, and then John, and then Rob.
Okay, so if I recall from the presentation, we were told that anything above what they asked for would be immediately returned to us. So as part of the proposal. No, I mean, they said that they would.
What
Yeah.
they said, if they got more funds donated, then those would be brought back. So if they had more funding, so if we tell them we want them to buy 2 suits and they have more funds donated, we would still get the amount that we're funding.
Right.
So if you remember correctly, his office as well as BOD had searched for separate entities, and he listed them. And I know it had been pushed out to several entities, and some haven't gotten back. And I think just to clarify what he had said, was if those entities donate, whatever that money is going to come back to S&A.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
John? I was not here for the presentation, I apologize for that. And I can certainly appreciate the health concerns that Sharon has raised. But I would say, having been on this committee for a few years, it's my understanding that my recollection of it, that our practice has never been to approve for more money than the group asked for. I like the idea that Sarah offered a few minutes ago, which is that if we think there are genuine health concerns that warrant an additional suit, an additional provision for cleaning, that we ask them to come back and make that request. rather than trying to second guess, which makes a lot of sense, but I think as a matter of practice, it'd be wise not to approve more money, to have a standard that we don't approve more money than we do possess.
Okay. Robert?
I was kind of curious, when you were saying about we, I guess, gave more money because obviously it's a person thing, so that.
Well, so if you fund travel, they cannot go purchase something to be spent here.
Yeah.
So when we talk about they have to manage it, they still have to manage it for the purpose that we fund it.
Okay.
So, in saying hotel has to be X amount and airfare has to be X amount, we don't hold them to that level of how they manage the budget as long as they're still spending it for the purpose in which it was funded.
So, is it possible for us to say something like, so are we talking about, I guess technically it would be a third suit, because they have the one, right? And you're in this division one. The health and services one, the summer seems to be pressure. Instead of like saying, this committee saying, oh, here's $6 grand per suit, you can be like, here's $3 grand, if you match it or something. But they're just asking, that way you're not.
Were you not here for the presentation?
No, that's, I mean, they're talking about these suits,
Okay.
so I just was curious.
Yeah, we reviewed his budget. Well, he presented his budget, and there would not be enough funding for him to match that. His funding's depleted. Shane?
Oh, his entire goods and service budget for the year is $5,000.
And JD.
I want to bring up a point that Dr. Shriver brought up last week during this, sometime after this, that these suits and these mascot things generally cost a heck of a lot more than what this one is. And I think that's a very important point, is that this is not although it is the number looks big and the concern is big, the amount of what we're getting for the price we're paying, and the fact that this is Wellington Wildcat, the face of Central Washington University, I think that it is not only a necessity for an additional 2 suits for them to buy. I think we also need to pay for the cleaning, and I would like to make a motion to vote and approve the amount of $10,911.12, which would cover the additional 2 suits minus the cooling vest and reservoir with straws, and it would also include $1,080 for the cleaning fees for the additional 2 seats for 9 months. We could even subtract the difference for the cost of sensitive sheets.
Point of order, just so you know, when you make a motion, you don't have to explain it, you just make the motion and then we'll move into a discussion.
Okay.
All right, so there's currently a motion on the table for the support of $10,911.12. Is there a second?
Bring it back to discussion.
Then bring it back to account. Like to bring it back to discussion. Is there any other motions on the table? Sarah.
I would move that we fund for what they asked for and strongly suggest that they come back with a second request for more funding for another suit and cleaning expenses.
I will
Is there a
second.
second? John seconds. Okay. Any discussion?
Can you repeat the motion?
Yeah, I didn't hear the motion.
She would like.
Sorry.
She would like to. She's moving to support for what they asked for, which was the total of $1,540.56, and strongly support that they come back and present for a second suit.
For clarification, didn't he say that he wasn't actually requesting that full amount?
That is the best amount.
That is it was
Okay.
2,005.
It was, okay,
Yes.
thanks.
So the motion on the table is for $1,540.56. We do have a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes. Thanks, guys. All right, at this time, I'd like to move to Section 8, supplemental funding requests, and currently there are no pending requests. So we will move on to Section 9, old business, and I believe Stephen Hussman, update from 2013 request number 1309.
Sure, want me to come up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Looking forward to you.
Could you take me to the library's website? Whoever's got that. Sorry, I wasn't sure how much time I'd have, so I didn't want to. Once you get me in, I can take glasses on. Sorry about this, guys. Okay. Yeah. Tension's mounting. Don't worry, I'll get there. Okay, student newspaper. Okay, about a year ago, I came to you guys, I think it was November, I think most of you were here then, and I requested funding from S&A to digitize our microfilm. And so over a period of about 6 months, we've had the microfilm digitized, and now here's the project. This is, you can see actually a few paragraphs in here that I've written about. You can read through the whole thing, but I know you guys have a lot on your plate, but I wanted to show folks that the project has been completed, the microfilm has been digitized, and now we have essentially an institutional record online for you to research. And we made sure that everybody involved, all of you, are mentioned here on the webpage. And I wanted to make sure I came in and thanked you all for your generosity, because now you have your stamp on our institutional memory. Students, faculty, community can come in and research this 24/7. This goes back to 1917 all the way to 2000. So what it allows you to do is search by text, and I can do a little search for you if you like. Let's see, I'll do a little simple search. I'll plug this in right here. Okay, let's try mascot. Oh, no, what?
Mascot.
Oh, well, we could do that. We could do that. Actually, I go home. If you guys want to give me the old suit, I'll put them in the archives. That's what we did with the other head. So anyway, I just did a little search for Dean Nicholson. And so what this does, it literally will take you, and I can't really show here, but it will highlight at each issue that his name appears. So you go back as far as you want. So you can search building names, presidents, individual faculty, activities that you've engaged in here. I even had a few people just run searches on themselves as students. Did I really look like that as a student 20 years ago? Yeah, we all did. So, but the issue here is that this is such a great tool, and I know Richard, Scott Wade, and Bob Ford have already used this particular search engine to generate a lot of information about student activity, student life. What was life like at Central back in the 1940s during the war years? So anyway, I wanted to make sure I could come back and show you where all the money had gone and really what the end product was. And so I wanted to come in and thank you all for this and take a look at it and play with it a little bit and send me your feedback.
It's a lot better than the microfiche.
Well, you're exactly right.
So much better.
Well, and if you go back and look at you read the narrative that I put in there, we put a little bit of the history of the newspaper in there, but we also put in a narrative for a number of reasons why we wanted to get this done. One, first and foremost, was accessibility, this is you pointed out. Secondly is preservation. A lot of the older issues, particularly pre-1920, are literally falling apart. And so for all of us, and particularly me as a university archivist, I'm obligated, and I really wanted to show my commitment, my true commitment to the university to really trying to get this taken care of. And so we've embarked on this, and because of your help, directly as a result of your help, it's been realized. And so you can take time to look through it, and see what you can find. There's all kinds of stuff in there. And I'm a sports nut, so researching various sports activities, you name it. A lot of it is in there. So I want to thank you for it, and now we'll leave.
Hey, thanks, Les, Steve. It's always good to see our money going to good
Oh,
places like
thank you
that.
guys.
We really appreciate you coming back and giving us that report.
You bet.
All right. I might have to search my family's names in that later. Interesting. Yeah, right? Maybe I won't do that. All right, at this time, I'd like to move to subsection B, approval of supplemental funding guidelines from the subcommittee. And I will, Sharon, speak.
So, the committee has met now a couple times since we formed. And there were a couple items, and I just want to, there's a couple recommendations to follow, and then I'll pull up the draft tool for people to see. So we did complete an individual assessment tool, and we'll look at that. Now, that's not approved, that's just completed a draft. So in addition to the assessment tool, we also drafted recommended guidelines with the emphasis on recommended. The committee felt that the law accommodates a wide range of views pertaining to S&A funds, and there was concern that if the guidelines were too strict or not stressed as recommended guidelines, it could dissuade students and programs for applying for the funds. So we wanted to make sure that even though we completed some guidelines and drafts, that we were also not telling students to come to the committee. Okay, and then we also have two recommendations, and I'll pull up the tool. So along with the tool, you're going to see different items for consideration and to be key points to think about. So we were wanting to recommend that individual items listed within the assessment tool be incorporated into the helpful hints documentation related to supplemental funding as items they are encouraged to demonstrate within their request or their presentation. And along with just the items in the tool, we also wanted it to be considered looking at a potential extension of the items that are in the recommended guidelines, because there's two different parts to it. Then in addition to that, the committee would also like to recommend that we invite the high impact practice committee folks to come in and do a presentation just as a small educational piece on what does the university look at for high impact practices. Once that presentation has been heard, that we would like to maybe suggest that the committee consider including either a link to the high impact practice documentation or information to be included into the helpful hints part. So those are the two, those are the two recommendations. So let me pull up the tool. Okay, and again, I stress draft. Sorry. Okay, so I might have to scroll down some. Find that one. I have to scroll down some.
See if the top of the screen one in the middle.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get to the bottom. Sorry, folks. Okay, so I'll work our way through this. So there's a couple items, and we went through a couple different versions of, is it a rating tool, is it not a rating tool? Because what we wanted to avoid, and folks from the committee, feel free to speak up, we wanted to avoid anybody asking for copies of these documents, as any notes you make are subject to request. Because what we really don't want is, for instance, just an example of maybe you rate one presentation a 5 and one a 3, but yet you fund the 3 one at a higher level than a 5. We wanted to avoid any types of that, so we took out the rating scale. Doesn't mean the committee can't put it back in, but that was the reasoning behind that. We started with what is the highest level of statutory authority. So this is just a small blurb from the killing guidelines, just to have in front of people's thoughts. And then what are some of the policies and procedures within S&A? So our S&A policies and procedures, this is the criteria, some of the criteria listed under supplemental funding here, just so it's up front, people are thinking about it. Then we wanted to go more into detail of we have heard for the last couple of years of what was important as committees were assessing. So we talked about an educational component. If it's a conference, who is presenting? What is the impact to participating students, non-participating students, or the university as a whole? How is it being paid for? So the contributions, is it shared costs, or what are their other revenue sources? And how did they demonstrate being efficient with the budgeted amount when they came up with the budgeting? So they were thinking along the lines like one person to a hotel room versus 4 people to a hotel room. They went out and looked for, Expedia flights versus, high-end flights and so on. So that was just some of the thoughts that were coming in. So I don't know if you guys want to talk about this separate from the other document, or you want me to review the other one next.
I would recommend that we have a discussion on this before we review this.
Okay.
And then we also, you can't see it there, let me scroll down a tiny bit on this. We did ensure that there was a little disclaimer here so that people understood too that it's a tracking tool to help assist us.
Could you go back up to the priorities?
So the ones from the S&A procedures?
Jacob,
Oh, sorry.
are we moving into a discussion?
Yes. Yeah, we'll be moving into discussion. Fine.
I have actually 2 questions. The first one is, we need to make it clear that even though we're number one, the first question, we're going to make these available, was a decision made by the subcommittee as to whether the form was going to be made available to the general public on the website, even though the actual completed notes that we look on.
So in the recommendation, you want to go ahead?
Sure. My understanding is that specifically this form will not be made verbatim to the public. However, we would like to take the points that this form outlines and add them to the helpful hints section of the funding request that they receive now.
Thank you. That's a great thought. The other piece that I want to make clear is that even though these are for as specified use of the committee, they still would be available in a public information request, so they'll have to be maintained, kept for a period of 2 years.
Joey?
And going off that part that Connie said, so it could be something for the committee to discuss on whether or not we would want this as a form that would be filled out with each presentation, or simply a document that we have in our S&A folder that you can look at to review when someone's presenting and make the mental notes and ask the questions on. So that is up to the committee on whether or not you would want it as a form to be used with each one, where we would take those notes and have to keep those records, or just as one to use as a guide when making those decisions and asking questions.
Connie?
Quite honestly, if you would follow the letter of the law, even if we were to make notes in this committee, it would still be subject. If it was pushed, anything that you do here could be requested. So.
Miles?
I have a question. So it says if conference who is presenting, so as a committee, are we more leaning towards approving proposals that the people that are going to conference that are presenting? That's what
I think. Jay?
So it's important to understand that this right here these aren't our guidelines. Our guidelines will be on the next page. This is simply an assessment tool. And what we'll do is we'll listen to the presentation, and as Joey said, there's either the option of looking at it as a guide and like keeping track for your own notes, or actually physically writing it on this as a system to take notes. So it's more of, and if you take your own notes, those are still subject. Like if you take it on regular piece of paper, they're still subject to being public record. But this is simply a guide. This isn't guidelines. It's like almost think of it as like checking off boxes. Like, okay, there's this, then there's this, and then there's this.
Sharon?
Another thought by the committee of that question is always asked to help people think about to what level I want to support a request. But we also included other components. So maybe they're not presenting, but it has such a high educational impact, you think, well, I still want to support it anyhow. So it's more of, again, as JD said, a guideline to help you think about several different components that should be considered during the request.
Connie.
So in the end, it really doesn't matter whether the form is used to keep notes on or it's just used for informational purposes and you take your own notes. Because everything is subject. So I think really we need to remember this is really just to help us to make our own notes and be consistent in doing that.
Can I make a suggestion? Or not suggestion, can I discuss this? Okay. I think it should be something that we can take our own notes on. And then after we vote, we turn it into either me or one of the advisors, and then we'll keep that for public record for 2 years in a filing system to make sure it's safe. Because, I mean, you're taking your own notes. I have 1 million notes in my own binder personally. If you keep it on one sheet of paper, you're going to remember the stuff that's important the next week. It's just going to be uniform and filed correctly. So what do you guys think about that? Like, write your own notes when they present, and then after we vote the next week, turn in those notes to either myself or the advisors, and we can store those in a safe place. How does the board feel about that, Connie?
That's actually exactly what our business services person suggested, and exactly for that reason.
Okay.
Because if we do go through a public information request, we would be doing a better job as a committee if we kept everything together.
I completely agree.
Well, and I would say rather than discussing that point, that could just be something that we understand will have to happen if we pass this one.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? Ashley?
As a committee member, I welcome any suggestions, whether if you like it, if you dislike it, if there's changes you'd like to make.
I'd like to say you guys did a great job. And I think it looks good. I think I personally really like this because, like I said, it's going to keep things uniform and filed correctly. So, any further discussion from the board? We can probably move on to the next.
So do we want to vote on at least this piece as a tool to be implemented?
The board? The board would like to vote on this. Just leave that up to you.
I motion to approve this. Form, assessment.
Okay, there's a motion on the table. Is there a second? Seconded by Robert. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes.
Okay, so the second portion of this that either can work, we tried to do it so they could either be independent or working together. But we took several guidelines from around the university of how S&A funds are used, looked at our own guidelines as well, and created a draft. And again, we really wanted to stress that it's recommended guidelines because we don't know the types of requests these students could come up with that might perfectly be legal, and we don't want to say you can't come to us. So that was what the first two sentences state. But then supplemental funding can be either to base funded programs or to non-base funded programs. So this is written in two ways. The base funding is subject to the assessment guidelines, criteria in 102. So that's these two items here, because this is our policies and procedures and such. And then when it goes down to non-base funding guidelines, and again, this was a starting point, so if anybody has strong feelings, it's not going to hurt anyone's or make us upset. So we have events and we have travel. So in events, there is some clear definitions here. I don't know if you guys just want to read them or if you want me to read them. And then we addressed events by itself, and then we addressed travel by itself. So on the travel, and I think that was what really generated more conversation, because meals are a part of travel too, so we gave meals its own bullet point. But We said requests related to travel are limited to transportation-related expenses, registration, guest speakers, advertising, hotels, and educational supplies. So that is pretty standard with Club Senate, Academic Senate, and some other funding entities. Doesn't mean it has to be all inclusive, and we can remember that this is recommended guidelines, so you have the ability to fund outside that. And then the meals, we put meals requests are related to travel. Oh, sorry. Not covered by conference registration, because a lot of registrations include meals, must demonstrate a financial hardship. In general, meals are not funded. So we wanted to not lock it down 100%. I remember last year we had a gal going to New York that had budgeted like $20 for her meals, and it was like, that wasn't a realistic expectation. And she did demonstrate a financial hardship and stuff. So we, there are cases, but we also want to kind of have a baseline too. So open it up for comments.
Again, I don't know how specific you want to get. I know you want to leave some leeway. It seems like we like to encourage groups staying overnight to have four students per room with double, instead of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know how you would, say that. Just maximize the. Is that in there?
That's why we have this.
Budget efficiency.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you go to a point of saying that about meals, but you left that out. Okay. Because meals would be budget efficiencies. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So in the helpful hints, we already have the 4-person per hotel,
Okay.
with the hotel as recommended. But the concern of if somebody thinks it's required and they end up feeling like they're forced to share a room with somebody uncomfortable, we don't want to.
Good.
Any further discussion from the board? Joe?
Sharon, can you just, and again, I missed the meeting today, but section 1, the subsection D there, can you just explain that one a little bit more clearly? Benefits university or subset if not club sponsored?
So, not to think where my head was at here. So, in other words, there has to be a benefit. Either the subset would be a group of students or the university. So it can't be like students coming and they want to go to Six Flags, and there's nothing that we can draw a real benefit to, or something along that line.
So my only thing was, what was the section that if not club sponsored?
So,
because the way that I would read that, just
Uh-huh.
in general, again, I missed the conversation today, but is if you take, it could almost be beneficial without that, because then it's almost saying if there is club sponsored, it doesn't need to demonstrate a benefit to the university or subset. So I'm just not sure if there was a specific reason why we had that.
I probably borrowed the language from another
Okay.
document, so it can definitely be reworked however
We'll go
he wants to suggest.
JD, Derek, and then Ashley.
Just if you look at it, this might be able to answer your question, Joey. It says the nature of the event must clearly be established and relate directly to at least one of the items. So if it's not clubs, if it is club sponsored, that one does not apply. D cannot apply to it if it's club sponsored. So it still has to be fall in A, B, or C, which would have to have have direct educational value or relates to the purpose of the club or establishment of the organization of the club. And you could even go further to say that it has to have benefits to the university in like a subsection E or something like that as another field to completely eradicate that. So if it is club sponsored, that doesn't apply.
Derek?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, that A and D are mutually exclusive.
A and D, yeah, I noticed that. And Ashley? Okay. I would like to mention. Oh, sorry.
I I'm wondering about the base funded programs. I didn't notice this when we were talking about this today. But it says, listed, criteria listed in section 1 and 2, but are we providing section 1 and 2?
That's what I was going to bring up.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of confusing because, can you scroll back down?
I think what I need to do is section 1 and 2 of the assessment tool.
Because it says, if you scroll back down, it says, subject to assessment guidelines. That makes me think these guidelines, which would be section 1 and the 2 underneath it, instead of the guidelines on the previous page. And I was a little confused when.
I think we maybe should just put them there rather than referring.
Yeah.
I'm wondering.
That.
I
Put
agree.
them there rather than referring to another piece of paper that we're not going to share with people.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I agree.
Sure. Are we saying we're sharing this with people then?
Oh, I don't know, but
I think that's further discussion.
Sure.
I think just to make it almost easier for ourselves too.
So I'll restate that.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that's a good idea. To kind of clear, I was a little confused at first. I thought it was talking about the guidelines below where it says events and then the subsection 2.
Okay.
These guidelines is listed there also. So I
I'm
think.
just going to make myself a note to these actual guidelines.
Okay. Any further discussion from the board?
a little typo in the very end.
All right, Sarah?
Last
line.
line.
The very last.
On the very last line, it says meals on Malcolm, it should say are. Instead of on. The last.
Third to last.
Third to last.
Good catch.
Is there another page, or does this comprise the?
Is it?
So one thing I noticed then is that the guidelines don't say anything about the importance of groups going to the other bodies on campus that can fund them. I think in the base funding hearings last year, that was an important consideration, that we wanted groups to go to the student academic senate and so on.
Derek, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, related to that. So when a proposal comes before us saying that that somebody received X dollars from Club Senate, for example, that they actually have received, that's not anticipated. Like for instance, the club
For family studies.
Yeah, they actually hadn't received.
That's good. That'd be a good presentation. Sure.
So that's, you will see that on absolutely every request because of the timing of when our meetings happen and their meetings happen. So what happens to accommodate for that is all of those funding packets go to one funneling source, which happens to be an office that reports to me. And if they end up being overfunded, the excess funding comes back to SMA.
Okay.
So we make sure that we accommodate for that in how we actually manage the packets. Going back to Professor Bowen's comment about making sure they've gone to other areas. So that is addressed in the funding packet, and it's also addressed here, but to say that we're not going to fund somebody because they did or did not go, I don't know if you want to put it in the guidelines versus not. I mean, that's totally up to the committee, but it's certainly something to wait on to what level you want to fund a request, which is why we put it in this area right here. But I'm certainly open to, the committee wants to say they must or something.
I don't feel that should be a guideline. I think it's kind of unsaid, and it also is mentioned above in the assessment tool. Maybe they don't meet the requirements to go present for funding at SAS or Club Senate. And that shouldn't be a negative effect upon them because of that. And then to kind of go back to Derek had said, it's hard because Club Senate's actually the same time we meet, and SAS, as you know, is on Thursdays. So it's the timing there is kind of off a little bit. And I believe JD had something, your hand was up?
I was going to answer this question with what Sharon said.
Okay, perfect. John?
Well, I would just add that in last year's base funding hearings, we gave a significantly larger allocation to student academic senate with, as I recall, the understanding that more of these supplemental allocation requests would be heard only there and never make it to this body. That's a major objective of the base funding hearings last year was to decentralize the allocation process for supplemental items. So I guess I was not involved in drafting these guidelines, and I appreciate them, but I guess to me, it would be important to include as a guideline at some point, maybe I'll support you said, Sharon, where it appears elsewhere in these documents, maybe that's good enough, but I think it's very important to encourage groups to go to those other bodies on campus. Since a significant amount of money was allocated to Student Academic Senate for this quadrennium precisely for that purpose.
Okay. Do you have something to add to that, or?
I just want to say I completely agree with that.
Okay, yeah, I now that you mentioned that, thanks for bringing up the procedural history of that. I had no idea, so that's a good point for us that don't know that. Sharon and then Derek.
So how about if we said something like, it's not as, because we set the guidelines to say, this is how we will fund, but what about if we made it like a section 4 that says students are expected to pursue all other available areas of funding sources.
Sure.
So, okay.
Expected? That's a good
Well,
word. Something along those lines.
Expected to pursue.
Okay. Or encouraged.
Is it encouraged or expected?
I would say
That's it. I mean, that's.
Uh-huh.
I would,
Do you guys say it's expected?
I would say it's expected for those programs that have base funding, given what happened with it. But for you know what I'm saying, non-base funding would probably be more encouraged because they don't have base funding, and the SA.
I think we're two different.
Those are two different things. Yeah, I think John had mentioned. Correct me if I'm wrong. You funded SAS a higher amount to encourage more groups to only go to SAS. What groups are those groups then? I mean, how do we determine?
See, my understanding was base groups.
Okay.
We were getting a lot of requests for $600, $750, $1,200. And we said that we were hoping that this would cut down on those smaller requests and that maybe this group would handle the larger requests. Is that right, John?
That's how I remember.
Okay. Who was first, Robert or Derek? I didn't see. I think Derek and then Robert.
Okay. As I understood, I attended S&A a bit, a couple years ago, and as I understood it, the idea was that if you had access to Club Senate or you had access to SAS, which a lot of you would, that if you had a request, you went there first, and then if you needed more, you came here. So basically, like the first thing people would ask is, how much do you get from SAS? And they'd say, nothing. Well, come back when you get something. Because that's their purpose, is you're supposed to go there.
Robert and Connie.
I'm not sure if this will highlight the topic of discussion, but I just wanted to mention that SAS also changed the amounts of requests.
They did increase to $2,000?
Well, it all depends how many students are going.
Okay.
So, I mean, they did increase the maximum amount by 600, provided you have 7 students or more going. Otherwise, anything below 7 students is cut off at a certain amount. So it's no longer like one person can request $900, one person can only request $300. So they did, because the whole reason why they did this was because of the increase in the base funding to reflect.
Connie.
Could you go back to the tool that we did? Because I think that are we equal and in both the tool and then examining their budgets to determine who and how much it came from? I mean,
That's a good idea.
Going to the point that Derek made earlier about, well, show us only what you have in your pocket, not what you asked for, maybe or maybe not. I think the important thing is we look at everything that they asked for, because then we know have they gone to those places and how much have they got, so we already see that in every request.
Any further discussion? Derek.
Yeah, to address that, I would say, what did you ask from these people, and what did you get? So did you ask 3,000, or did you get 3,000? I asked for 3,000, I got 0.
So it does say in the funding packet a place for them to show, because we want to know, did they go to them? Because of timing of when a lot of these events happen, there isn't necessarily time to get on SAS's budget, do their requesting things. And funds technically aren't released from SAS or Academic Senate until after they come back. So that's why we have to put Academic Senate and Club Senate requested and the amount they requested, so that at least we have visibility of it, because their funds technically are not released until after they return, which is too late for them then to come to us.
Point of order. We've been discussing this for 23 minutes and been on the second group now for almost 15. And so I recommend that we either make a motion to table and bring it back next week with the committee making suggested adjustments, which wouldn't necessarily be bad since we don't have a funding request right now, or that we make a motion to approve something.
Okay. Is there a motion? Rob?
Motion to table this until next week.
Okay, is there a second? Derek, second? Any discussion? JD?
I'd like to point out that the subcommittee has been meeting and going over this, obviously, and to continue to keep on doing this and getting all these finite things and making a very limited guideline, I think for the subcommittee and then coming back and going through the same process again is going to be a little bit of a waste of time. I think that we need to kind of hash this out as quickly as we can, seeing how this is the guidelines that we will carry on with for the rest of the year. And I think that it's important that we have these set before we continue to have more and more people and more requests coming through here.
Derek?
I agree with that in principle, although I think it's more important to do it right.
So point of clarification. JD, are you suggesting that we do not table?
I'm suggesting that we do not table this issue for next week. I suggest that we.
There's currently a motion on the table to table. So, all in favor? All opposed? All right, any abstentions? Motion denied. We'll continue discussion. Thanks for that, Ashley. Yeah. So we were discussing, how did we go on?
I'm making the adjustments now that we've talked about already, just in case we decide that we're doing that.
Were we stuck on expected or encouraged?
I
think that
No, I think
I think that's what we're left on, right?
You're quiet.
Okay, Miles?
I have a question. Are we kind of set on what this is? Like, do we have a general understanding of everything as the committee members?
Yeah, that they're just recommendations for presentations.
Yeah, so I feel like the motion on these guidelines.
Well, yeah.
Oh, or is she not done?
She's not done yet.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead, yeah.
The section 1 and 2 that people wanted spelled out so they didn't have to refer to the tool.
I think that's a good idea.
And then just for point of clarification, because I know you're adjusting this and doing technical pieces, is that if we're not going to put the 1 and 2 for bullet points, to take off that 1 and 2
Yeah.
part, okay.
Derek?
And just to be clear, these are not binding in any way, and we can do whatever we want.
They're just
They're
recommendations.
recommended guidelines.
They're tools.
Yeah, it's a tool for us internally.
So we don't-
To stay consistent.
And it states right here, the purpose of the recommended guidelines is to augment or provide further structure and consistency in how the committee distributes supplemental funds.
And it's up to the discretion of each member. These are just guidelines, so. Any further discussion?
Just a point of parliamentary procedure, the typos or the formatting doesn't matter. It can be changed at any time without any approval. So Sharon doesn't have to make it pretty now for you to vote on it, just as long as.
I'm just spending time.
I know, I need them to know that they don't have to wait, that can be adjusted at any time.
Okay. Miles?
Okay, so, thank you. I move the motion to approve these guidelines.
Is there a second?
Second.
John, second. Any discussion?
These
Robert?
these are available to where we look at. or just-
These are just for us.
We haven't discussed that for this piece yet, we discussed it for
Yeah,
the tool.
for this piece, yeah.
So,
JD, do you have something to add?
If I recall correctly, at our meeting today, we discussed that having both of these as both the guidelines and our tools formatted in a different way as for helpful hints when they go to apply. Sharon, am I correct on that? Is that what we
Yes,
discussed?
when I talked about our report back, that's where we put here in the recommendation section, we would like to have the items as points in the helpful hints so that people understand that we are looking at these items. But
So it's not going to be
might not
spelled out like that, but it's going to be bulleted. So these forms will be just for us, but the gist of the forms will be online for people that are requesting something wants to see. JD?
The intent of that would be to be like, if you're going to present, these are some things you might want to think about for
Yes.
this. That's all that is.
Yes.
There's no, this is what we're looking for.
So the guidelines would just be maybe distributed during training or something like that, is that what I'm understanding? Would be-
These right here?
Yeah.
I'm thinking on the back of the page of the assessment tool, just in case somebody needs to refer to them.
So that way, with every presentation, you have
We
those
have it.
guidelines as long as the assessment, as well as assessment. Any further discussion? Connie?
So doesn't that answer Robert's question then, as to whether it would be
Yes.
not okay?
Yes,
So I
that does
think by
answer your question.
definition, the answer would be it's not going to be debated.
But
But
the key points of it would be included in the helpful
But the
hints
form
to
itself
demonstrate it.
is
Yes.
not
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
any further discussion? Sarah?
Would it be a problem if somebody did submit a public records request and that was on the back of the form? Does anybody have a problem with that?
No? I don't see a problem with it.
It's actually out there in the requirements anyway. I mean, the
Oh, so this actually is somewhere else?
No, but the general guidelines are drawn from requirements.
If they presented that form, if they presented that request, this would have to be given whether it was on the back of that form or not.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Gotcha. All right.
Any further discussion? All right, there's a motion on the table and there's a second, so all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes. Thanks, guys. All right, we'll now move on to section 10, new business. Oh, just kidding, we already did that. All right, so we're gonna move on to section 11, other business, communication received. No communications? Okay, and I have not received any either. So we'll move on to section 12, public comment, second call. Okay. All right, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Meeting adjourned at 7:06 p.m.